What was going on that was so bad in the design and implementation of that beautiful OceanGate Titan submersible that caused it to implode in the summer of 2023? What caused this otherwise beautiful submersible that looked like this going into the water to end up looking like this at the bottom of the ocean? So today I'm going to show you, just short and sweet, some of the key highlights of the testimony from former OceanGate employees that might shed a whole bunch of light for us on just what was going on in the background and what was so wrong there. And you're going to find out that things were much worse at OceanGate than any of us ever imagined.
I wouldn't sign off on it, so I got terminated.
So then there was this issue of this totally kludged life support system here in this CO2 scrubber that he's got in the middle of this thing. And I don't know what Stockton was thinking, but he designs as the core of this life support system that's supposed to remove your CO2 out of the air and give you oxygen. But he makes the core of it essentially a Lego storage bin that he probably got on sale at the dollar store with a personal computer fan on top of that. Oh yeah, folks, I'm pretty sure this is military grade. As a matter of fact, I found them on sale today at Sam's Club. Stockton way overpaid for his, I'm sure. But this design of his is such a Mickey Mouse operation. It's so kludged and so unbelievable. I don't even think it could pass for science fiction on Star Trek.
Hooked into the life support, designed to affect it.
Life support is still operating. I would say that the installation is incomplete.
So first up is former Director of Engineering, Tony Nissen. And you're going to be surprised by the reason why Stockton Rush got rid of him.
So it was a lot of pain to get here. We did this extremely fast.
And we do have some older video of Tony, as you saw there, and then right here, when they were building the first version of the Titan hull, Cyclops 1, back in 2018. This is not the version that imploded.
I was hired by ATK Launch Systems. We built the solid rocket boosters for the space shuttle. I designed instruments for them. My claim to fame there is I designed an instrument to measure temperature, pressure, and displacement inside an O-ring groove during a rocket motor firing. He wouldn't give an inch much at all. So the fights that I had with Stockton, most of it behind closed doors, because as the director of engineering, let's keep continuity in the crew. And they can't really know that the two people on top are in solid disagreement. Most people would just eventually back down from Stockton. Like it was almost death by 1,000 cuts in most of the things.
Now, Stockton Rush had contracted with the University of Washington Applied Physics Laboratory to help out with some of the engineering. But they were becoming increasingly perturbed with some of his engineering concepts, like, for example, incorporating glass spheres, which are dangerous underwater. They can cause huge implosions. And so that led to a souring of their relationship.
And so the University of Washington Applied Physics Lab said that utilizing glass spheres in the atmosphere on the outside, so not in the pressure hull, was a no starter for them.
For Pete Brodsky, for sure. Even oil filling them, Pete was not okay with it. And so personally, he didn't want to be part of it.
And that was the point at which OceanGate ceased the engineering?
With Pete.
With Pete.
Yep. If I remember right, we severed Mr. Dyer with Dave Dyer before Pete. Actually, it's fair to say that we didn't sever the relationship with APL all at once at the same time.
Were you involved in the carbon fiber hull winding process?
I watched the whole thing. That's it. Yeah, so I set up GoPro cameras and watched most of it. I think it took a month.
Did you ever visit Spencer Composites, and what was your technical opinion of the facilities and processes which you
Facility-wise, it's a bit dirty. For me, it was a little bay of a concern of ours. Thought, well, let's just make sure that nobody's blowing the leaf blower around here because of all this dust while they're winding it. If it was a suggestion that we made, such as we're going to put a hood over this, are we worried about dust or something, it was definitely not well received.
And as the director of engineering, did you make all engineering decisions?
No.
Did you make any engineering decisions?
Yes.
And who would make the majority of the engineering decisions?
It was Stockton.
So it seems here that OceanGate CEO Stockton Rush is pretty much overriding everything his director of engineering, Tony Nissen, does. It's almost as if like this position of the director of engineering is more or less like an honorary position, kind of like an honorary PhD type thing. It's like a figurehead more than anything else. Okay, so I wanted to show you this official document here because this is what really shows how Stockton Rush and OceanGate had completely misled people about the level of participation from Boeing in the design. And so right in here, you can see that in March 2020, OceanGate released a request for the carbon fiber hull manufacturing project. But you can see right here, Boeing decided not to submit a proposal in response to this request for proposal, and they did not participate in Titan's design, construction, or any of the expeditions. That kind of flies in the face of what our good friend Stockton Rush was saying about Boeing, doesn't it? And then a month later, Boeing also declined an inquiry from OceanGate about using Boeing's autoclave to cure the Titan's carbon fiber. So what they were saying here is that OceanGate wanted to have their new carbon fiber hull wounded at the manufacturing facility and then send it down to Boeing to be auto-cured so that they could then imply that Boeing was manufacturing this for them. That's what it looks like from the outset here, at least to the casual observer. So as you can see on this video that I was able to make last year before they shut down the OceanGate Expeditions website, when they're talking about the submersibles here, specifically look at Titan. Right here I've got it outlined for you. The state-of-the-art vessel designed and engineered by OceanGate in collaboration with experts from NASA, Boeing, and the University of Washington made its subsea debut in 2018. So based on everything that you and I have heard at this Coast Guard hearings in the past 2 weeks here, that doesn't sound to be very true, does it? This is why I think this sort of feeds into Stockton Rush's, what I call his narcissism, because he's trying to elevate himself up to the levels of all of these other established people. That would be like me saying, yeah, I went and had lunch with Bill Gates and we talked about some project I'm working on, and guess what? Now I can go and tell everybody I'm in collaboration with Microsoft on this new product, which is definitely not true. And then here it says, before the Titan, Boeing had limited prior engagements with OceanGate concerning other early stage concept vessels. So this is what they were talking about. This is where in 2013, right here, this document that I'm going to show you here below was generated by Boeing, and it was a feasibility study. So this is not them doing any engineering for you or designing of something necessarily. It's a feasibility study to see, hey, do we think that you can take your carbon fiber hull down to certain depths? What happened was here back in 2016, when OceanGate was testing their small scale, the 1/3 size cylinders over at the University of Washington's Applied Physics Lab, Boeing, says right here, Boeing was contracted to provide acoustic emissions data during the pressure tests on the cylinders. So that's the only involvement that Boeing had in this whole operation here. They didn't design anything for OceanGate. They didn't build anything for OceanGate. In fact, they were like pushing off, no, you can't even use our ovens to cure it. So it seemed that Stockton Rush was just creating this big facade, was the product of some great design collaboration between OceanGate, Boeing, NASA, and the University of Washington. So you can see what he's doing here. He's just throwing a bunch of big names around like narcissists often do to match their storyline to their elevated sense of self-importance. But the reality of the situation here is that Boeing and NASA and the University of Washington Applied Physics Laboratory all walked away from OceanGate. And by the way, the two main guys that we showed you before from the University of Washington Applied Physics Laboratory, they walked away from Stockton Rush in particular because they were disgusted by what they saw with the engineering as being too risky for human consumption. Here's that feasibility study that Boeing did for OceanGate on the original Cyclops. And right here, when they're talking about the preliminary design, I thought it was kind of odd. If you look right at this spot here, it says the maximum operational depth of 8,600 meters. So it looks like originally Stockton Rush had some lofty goals of going down to 8,600 meters. Now remember, the Titanic is only at about 3,800 or so meters. He's seeking a large margin of safety. But you can see further in here when they're talking about the thickness, they're saying for a thick-walled cylindrical hull constructed of reinforced carbon material, the wall thickness was estimated to be 9.3 inches. So this means that originally Boeing was kind of suggesting in their feasibility study that a hull would need to be somewhere around 10 inches thick. So now we know, as history goes, somewhere along the line, Stockton changed it. We hear from 7 inches and then, of course, down to the final 5 inches. So it is now half as thick as Boeing had originally suggested that it should be. So when I look at this table of the initial sizing for the preliminary trade studies, look at this. Now it's kind of blocky because that's the form that we got it in, but you can see right here, hull thickness, they had it in here as 9.3. So all of their numbers and calculations were based on that original thickness. And man, look at this total cost. If they had built it, this was, I guess, what they were estimating should be the cost and everything, over $2 million. And they were very adamant in here about not piercing the hull in any way, shape, or form with any type of hole that would ruin your safety margin. So they applied a safety margin of 1.5, which is typical in engineering. So then Boeing had mentioned here further in their study that after some optimization of the laminate, the thickness was reduced to 7 inches. And so they were kind of touch and go about whether it would cause any problems or not. But really, it almost looks like they're distancing themselves from coming up with a specific number. What they're saying right here is that the design of the cylinder will then be sized by the compression strength of the laminate and the interply tensile strength and the shear strength of the laminate. So what they're saying here is that the strength of the vessel really boils down to everything they're using, all of that carbon fiber, the way it's layered, the way it's cured, everything, all of that comes into play into what's going to determine the final strength of this hull. So why then did Stockton Rush drop it down to 5 inches? So then at the Coast Guard hearing, when they were interviewing Tony Nissen, they brought up this blog here that OceanGate had posted in April 25th of 2019, saying this.
And in the fourth paragraph, it states, the dive, which was validated by a representative from Lloyd's Register. And this was the April 19th, 2019 dive in the Bahamas. Did you have any communications with this validator from Lloyd's Register?
No, the whole classing, like all that validation was Stockton. I wasn't allowed to be in that. I really wasn't allowed to be in operations unless something went wrong.
Do you know why they would say that the dive was validated by a representative from Lloyd's Register?
That was Stockton's doing. I didn't validate it. No, in April 2019, that told me you can't go to the Titanic, like it killed it.
So once the crack was identified, and you had gone out to the Bahamas,
Yeah.
and you confirmed that there was a crack, what was your communications back with Mr. Rush?
I told him the hull's done. Put together a presentation for Brian Spencer. To help us understand this. Like, how did this happen?
There was a Titanic expedition scheduled for July of 2019, correct? So at that point, as the director of engineering, was your recommendation to cancel the
I killed it.
expedition?
I wouldn't sign off on it. So I got terminated.
It was from the strategic director of OceanGate Operations. Sent a letter to mission specialists stating that the reason for the cancellation of the 2019 Titanic expedition was due to the loss of the support vessel.
Right.
Were you aware that this was the case that was being told to the mission specialists?
I am.
Was there any plan to tell them that was there a hull available for the 2019 expedition?
No, that was Neil, Stockton, and Joel. We didn't have a hull.
And why did you depart the company?
Got fired.
When did you get fired?
June 2019, because I wouldn't let him go to the Titanic. Allegedly, what Stockton tells me, he invited me to lunch and told me that Mike Ferlotti and one other board member told him that I should have known that the hull was compromised and it wouldn't work, and either he or I had to go, and Stockton said, it's not going to be me.
Now check out this unbelievable bombshell here that Tony Nissen just dropped on the Coast Guard hearings on the OceanGate Titan sub.
My final question is, would you have felt comfortable as the director of engineering going down in the Titan submersible, specifically hull 1 to full rated depth?
That's almost the best question here, isn't it? Stockton's and my relationship started to turn sour as everything was built. He wanted me to be the pilot that runs the Titanic missions. And I told him I'm not getting in it. And he asked me why. And I said, because the operations crew, I don't trust them. That certainly was the death of me. But I didn't make it any easier with the following question. He said, well, what if I'm mission director? I said, you still have the same operations group. But I didn't trust Stockton either. They would take a look at where we started, and when I was hired, nothing that I got was the truth. I was held with a bag and trying to save, and I couldn't quit.
This was such a bombshell announcement at the Coast Guard hearings that the news media picked up on this right away and made it their headlines for the day. So it seems like OceanGate employees were either quitting or getting fired left and right now.
Miss Carl, when did you leave OceanGate?
My last day was February 23rd, 2018.
Can you kind of explain to us why you decided to leave OceanGate?
After that meeting, it became abundantly clear to me that OceanGate was not the place I wanted to work. If that was their attitude towards safety, then I didn't want to work for that company. I had full trust in David Lockridge, and if he wasn't there, then I could not be a pilot there. And after that meeting, I went home and updated my resume and started looking for another job.
Now, a lot of people have been asking me because they're confused. When I showed you the Coast Guard's official communications log between the Polar Prince mothership up above on the surface and the sub down below, remember that the last message that the Titan sent was, we're dropping 2 weights. And so some people automatically thought that that means, oh, they're in trouble and they're trying to ascend. And in fact, last year when they were still searching for the sub, before they even found the Titan on the bottom of the ocean floor, James Cameron, you remember, said that he was certain that they knew something was wrong because they had dropped weights and were coming back up. But I think even he was wrong.
A loud bang on the hydrophones, loss of transducer or transponder, loss of comms. I knew what happened. Sub imploded. I sent emails to everybody I know. I said, we've lost some friends. The sub is imploded. It's on the bottom in pieces right now. I sent that out Monday morning because as Bob pointed out, it's our belief, we understand from inside the community, that they had dropped their ascent weights and they were coming up trying to manage an emergency.
So I think James Cameron was wrong here. Because listen to this testimony. So this is from Tim Catterson. He's a former OceanGate contractor.
But for the most part, 30 to 35 meters a minute, that's a very standard number. Once they start approaching the bottom, he said on the log that they're dropping 2 weights. Each weight weighed 35 pounds. They shed 70 pounds. That's not enough weight to stop. It's not enough weight to come back up. He's just shedding weight to slow down. I feel is that the implosion happened instantaneously, that it was not the viewport that failed because there was no shards, there was no viewport, there's nothing. The viewport was blown out, it's out there somewhere still. The failure happened at the forward glue line at the ring. Cyclic fatigue of the glue. Every time they go and do a dive, the hull would collapse in the center. When it was squeezed down in the center, it was forced to try to rotate tortally. And I think the water got in through there, worked its way down until the final point when there was not enough glue line, there was not enough support by that titanium edge on the inside. And it had to have happened equally all the way around that ring. On the very inside, that inside tab, run your hand across it. It has been sheared off completely all the way around inward. The only way that would happen is if it all happened at once. That thing was sheared off smooth. So this had to happen extraordinarily fast, which means the people in there had no idea this was coming.
I think some of the best witness testimony here at these Coast Guard hearings was from this guy coming up here, David Lockridge. Now, David Lockridge is OceanGate's former director of operations. He goes down on a dive to the Andrea Doria with CEO Stockton Rush, and he's talking about all of the safety risks that Stockton was putting these passengers through on this trip.
And from there, he took it down. I kept saying, please keep your distance. Don't tell me what to do. That was the conversation. He came straight down, hard on the bottom. No trimming, no ballast, nothing. Smash straight down on the bottom. Visibility went everywhere. You could see a silhouette, and it was the 2 clients that were sitting in the viewing dome right next to the acrylic. And they were like, oh my God, we are right on the wreck. So I said to Stockton, please, all stop telling me what to do. Stockton, all stop. We have to see what's going on here. We have to look at our surroundings, which is standard practice for any competent submersible pilot. He decided to turn the submersible 180 degrees at speed, basically drove it full speed into the port side of the bow, and we could hear the cracking of the fairing as he got us jammed in underneath. At that point, it was unprofessional behaviour of him. He started to panic. And the first thing was, do we have enough life support on board? I was like, Stockton, of course we got enough life support. We need to get out here. When do you think the dive team could come to get us out? Stockton, please, give me the controls. I'm going to get us out of this. Every time I went to take the controller from him, he pushed it further and further behind him, inside the submersible itself. And eventually it took one of the paying clients to turn round Renata, who you're interviewing on Thursday. She shouted at Stockton to give me the effing controller. She had tears in her eyes. He reached round behind him. I had my head up inside the tower, so I'm still looking at the wreck, and he clattered it off the right side of my head. The controller landed on the deck plate. One of the buttons came off, the robust PlayStation controller. And I picked it up, repaired it, and had us out 10, 15 minutes. From there, it was all, oh, cheers, David saved us. Slight exaggeration. It shouldn't have got to the stage it got to. If he in any way had behaved like any other submersible pilot I know.
You didn't state this, but did he throw the controller at you at that
That's
point?
correct. And he hit me on the side of my head, on the starboard side, yeah.
Man, I really love this guy, David Lockridge. He's a true seaman. Only a true seaman would say, yeah, I got hit on the starboard side of my head. Love that. But there's a twist here, folks, because we're getting conflicting testimony between David Lockridge and Renata Rojas, who was a mission specialist, translation, a paying customer, a paying tourist on the Titan submersible there with Stockton Rush in the past. And she gives a different account of what happened on that dive to the Andrea Doria.
Then at some point, Lockridge took the controls. He put his head on top of the hatch, where you could actually see very well the bow, and very nicely drove us out in one sweep. I was actually very impressed. I did see David Lockridge's account of the events, and he must have gone on a different dive. Nobody was panicking, nobody was crying, and there was definitely no swearing and yelling.
Do you know, you said Mr. Lockridge took the controls. Do you know if Mr. Rush, since he was the pilot on that, correct, going down, do you know why he had to take the controls?
I don't know why he had to take the controls. He kept asking for the controls, though.
So how do we tell who's lying? Or maybe they're just mistaken. I don't know. Do you want to believe David Lockridge over here? Or do you want to believe Renata Rojas over here? So the one thing you need to keep in mind is that, remember, Renata has become quite friendly with Stockton Rush and his family, and she's been along for the ride on numerous dives, even though not always going down into the sub. But anyway, I think because she's so friendly with them, and it's quite obvious after listening to a couple of hours of her testimony, she didn't seem to want to let any cats out of the bag. As a friend of the family, understandably, she doesn't want to really say anything bad about Stockton. So I think she might be suffering a little bit from Stockholm Syndrome, or as I like to affectionately call it here, Stockton Syndrome.
Slightly, there is a lot more I would have put in this manual. The intention for OceanGate, unbeknownst to me when I came across, they wanted to be able to qualify a pilot in a day. Somebody that had never sat in a submersible. They wanted people to basically come in, get checked out as pilots, be able to take passengers down in the sub. That is a huge red flag. That is a no-no. You don't do that. It's a long process. It's not just a case of sitting down, driving a submersible around. There's a lot more to it.
Now, David Lockridge is starting to get upset OceanGate CEO Stockton Rush is now starting to take the engineering away from the University of Washington Applied Physics Laboratory and bringing it in-house, where there's essentially no expertise.
Couldn't tell you how far APL got with the final design of Titan. I said to Stockton I wasn't happy that we were phasing out APL. It got to the point that Tony and Stockton, I remember one day Dave came in to see me. We used to borrow dive gear from each other. And Dave came in to see me and they stood in the corner, wouldn't even speak to him. And when Dave left, they told me I've never to speak to that gentleman again, which is ridiculous.
Who was never to speak to the gentleman again?
I was never to speak to Dave Dyer again. This is during 2016. So I had to have no correspondence with Dave Dyer. That's what I was told.
And that was said to you by who?
Oh, that was said to me by Stockton Rush and Tony Nissen. Stockton wasn't happy with APL. The two of them were very vocal, saying that they did not want APL to do anything else with regards to the design concept and the build of Titan. They were going to do it all themselves.
Do you know why they made that decision?
Can I say arrogance? Thinking they could do this on their own without proper engineering support. I mean proper engineering support from people that have built things that have been subsea. May not be submersibles, but known products. Proper engineers that work for the university. We got talking. I just thought it was a general chit-chat, coffee, and it led to Stockton saying they were no longer willing to pay for my wife or my daughter's permanent residence. I probably did. I embarrassed him in front of clients. He wasn't happy, and I knew that was the turning point in our relationship within OceanGate. That's us. We're done. We're moving back to Scotland. The CEO, Stockton, came up and he said, I'm so sorry for yesterday. I've had a change of heart and I have decided I can't lose you. I need you on this project and I will pay for it. But you have to sign this addendum to your employment contract stipulating that if you leave over the next 12 months, you will reimburse us. Once I signed it, I was told by Stockton, and make sure you do not tell the immigration attorney that I've made you do this. So I obviously told my wife.
Now David is telling the Coast Guard Commission about some appalling defects that he found both in the first generation of the Titan carbon fiber hull and also in the titanium dome rings.
So image below shows the type of O-ring groove currently machined on both the forward and aft Cyclops 2 Titan dome ceiling faces. Okay, This selection deviates from the standard design process for our application. The addition of this unnecessary plunge hole in both our O-ring grooves also deviates from standard design process. As can be seen on both the images on the next page, the O-rings are not fully captivated due to the plunge hole. And this void on either side creates the potential for the least path of resistance of seawater. In my experience, the potential for this issue will be exacerbated by if we see any sort of buckling of the materials during the immense pressure changes as we go deeper. When this component came into the facility, I was appalled. I had never seen this before. They reused these domes, they reused these ceiling faces, they reused the acrylic, they reused the interior. Everything was reused. It's all cost now. And what happened was these sections of excess came in. The CEO and the engineering director decided that let's chop these up and give them to the clients that have paid to go on the Titanic. Let's give them out to the staff at OceanGate. We were all handed these. When the hull came in, I could see all the imperfections on it. This is one of the samples that I was given by the engineering director, which came from these cut-off sections. And please look at the state of it. There was so many delaminations, so many voids. The imperfections were incredible. There was glue runs everywhere. And that's a red flag. When I was fired, I'm obviously, not just concerned for myself and my family. what are we going to do now? But I didn't want anybody going in that submersible. I mean, it was dangerous. As I said, the build quality was atrocious. So I was terminated on the 19th of January. On the 6th of February, after dealing with Labour and Industries, I had a formal conversation with OSHA. He decided at that point my issues and my concerns about public safety, about the public going in the submersible, were serious enough that he wanted me, he said it to me, I knew nothing about this, to be put and placed under the whistleblower protection scheme. So on the allegation summary, which came from OSHA, and that was issued by Paul McDevitt, on or about January 23rd, 2018, Mr. Lockridge was discharged in retaliation for raising safety concerns about the development and testing of a submersible marine vessel.
Now, I was thinking of doing a couple of more videos based on the other testimony, like from the industry experts that testified here at this Coast Guard hearing, and just shorten it down to just the tidy tidbits of great info for you. So if you're interested in that, let me know down in the comments. And also, if you haven't been here before, make sure you binge watch some of these other videos. Make sure you check out this other video here on the Titan implosion. And we also cover all sorts of other engineering and remodeling videos here on this channel. Make sure you check out this other one too on the double-decker kitchen cabinet. That was a massive engineering effort. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see all of you on the next one.